I have the honor of introducing tonight our MC. Her name is Amber Parkinson up here. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Amber comes from a family deeply rooted in mental health expertise. Her mom is a licensed clinical social worker and a practice owner. Your brother's a psychologist, and your sister-in-law is also a social worker. And so for 15 years, Amber was in the fitness industry, and not that that's not still what you are about, but she embraced a brand new professional direction just not here too long ago, and she serves as the practice manager and a somatic and wellness coach at Edge Counseling and Wellness. And so she has told me, and she wrote this, having faced moments where faith communities offered unhelpful responses, such as being told to just pray more, God never gives you more than you can handle, or all things work together for good. Amber is especially grateful for Richwoods' commitment to openly addressing mental health. Her hope for tonight is to remind every attendee there is hope, you are seen, and you are valued, and you matter. And we mean that all the way across the board. And so I'm going to hand it over to Amber. She's going to introduce our panel. And so if you would give them a round of applause.
Thanks, Alyssa. Well, we are so excited you are here, and I'm just honored to be the MC for tonight. I thought I would start off by introducing the panel. So if you have not seen it on our social media, we have full bios listed there for everyone, but just a quick introduction. I hope you all, if you don't know Chad Manbeck, he is the lead pastor here at Richwoods. That is Chad. Then we also have Denine Moscato. She is the supervisor of outpatient mental health and substance abuse at Trillium Place. There we go. We have Kelly Mosley. Kelly is a licensed marriage and family therapist with over 20 years of professional experience, with a well-rounded background working with teens, adults, couples, and families from all walks of life. Okay, and last but not least, we have Emma Parmenter. So if you have seen a different name, that's because there's two different last names. One is maiden, one is professional. So you will see Emma Parmenter up here today. But she is a licensed professional counselor at Integrated Family Therapy of Illinois. Beautiful. Okay. So these were all questions that were submitted by our members at Richwoods Christian Church. So we are going to start off with our first question, and this is for Pastor Chad. So the first question we have is, someone being delivered from depression by God, how do you navigate being delivered by God from mental health and use of medication?
Yeah, thanks. Really grateful to be here. Representing the male species on stage. Appreciate that. Very intimidated right now as well. Let me put it this way, because this is a question I've gotten throughout this series of mental health. Balancing the tension or trying to between what can God do and what can medication do, and should I only choose one or the other? If you have a migraine headache, and God heals it, I will celebrate with you. If you have a migraine and medication heals it, I will celebrate with you. I think that we get tripped up on this idea that one is spiritual and the other is secular when it comes to means of healing, and I don't see it that way. I believe that God created people, right? And that he gave them wisdom and knowledge to create things and build culture and come up with modern medicine. And all of those things bring healing, as well as God himself directly. Either way, I see God as the healer. And there are biblical examples of this, of various kinds of healing that should set you free, not just to look at how you find your healing, but that you find it. Some of those examples, Paul talks to Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 23, and he says, hey, you have a belly ache, drink some wine. Right? He doesn't say, well, just pray about it. He says, hey, here's a real practical thing. You have a stomach issue, drink some wine. And then in James, it says, hey, if there's anyone sick, go to the elders of the church, and they will pray for you and anoint you with oil, and then you can find healing. So Timothy's told to drink some wine for his issue. In James, we're told to go to the elders of the church. In Acts chapter 19, Paul is healing people through a handkerchief, right? The Spirit of God was moving so powerfully through Paul that a handkerchief could touch you and heal you. And the same guy, Paul, also in Acts 28, it says it happened that the father of Publius lay sick with fever, and Paul visited him and prayed, putting his hands on him and healed him. So wine, oil, laying hands, a handkerchief. Man, what is the secret sauce? It's God. It's God working through a variety of means. So my answer on how to navigate it is this: celebrate all healing in all its ways and be free.
So the next question is for Emma, and this is a two-part question. So first part is, what are the signals of anxiety in a child that would trigger a conversation and possibly a need for counseling or outside help? We'll just start with that first part.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Man, what a question. I think an all-encompassing answer to that is, what are some signals I should follow if I feel like my child has anxiety, depression, something going on? Are they able to maintain the regular schedule that they had before? Are they able to do things that they would normally do? Are they able to go to school without trying to avoid it? Are they avoiding basketball practice because something came up? Do you find that they're reserved in their room for a while? Are they able to function at the normal level that someone their age should be? If they're not, then there might be something going on. And then that would be a question, just a conversation you'd have as a family of, hey, I think there's something deeper going on. That would be like socially. If you find, oh, my kiddo is not, like they're not who they were a month ago. Something's going on. Physically, this might look like a lot of fatigue, some irritability. Maybe their stomach hurts a lot. They can't eat food as much as they were before. You might find like, oh my gosh, I'm picking them up from school a lot because they say that they're sick, but I'm not seeing them have a flu or a cold. I don't know what's going on. They might, in their body, appear shaky, or their heart rate goes like all over the place. Things that would feel like they're kind of in a flight or fight situation. That's where you go, okay, I think we might need to talk to somebody, get some help, so that you can be back to that normal state.
Okay. And then the second part of that question is, can you share ideas for managing anxiety, especially when it may be stemming from grief and trauma?
Oh, yeah. Well, managing anxiety, we would all recommend, I think, counseling or talking to somebody. But there are great ways to get in front of anxiety. I think anxiety manifests in two ways: consistency and control. So it's kind of like a cult leader over your life. It wants control of everything going on, socially, emotionally, who you talk to, what's happening at the party, who's going to be there, do I have the homework I need for that day, what if I forgot my lunch, will you be there to pick me up, what time are you leaving? That's how it's going to sound. And so managing that anxiety is not giving in to the consistency or the control. It's really promoting flexibility, like, hey, we are going to change up our routine, but we're going to be okay. It's promoting like an internal self-assurance in that child, or even in that adolescent or person. Like, hey, we can do hard things and roll with it. I think grief or trauma, it really depends on the person, but for both, it's, I think, prolonged distress. That's where you go, okay, this might be manifesting more than just worry. I am in a prolonged state of distress, and my body is harboring that in trauma, or I could just be naturally grieving, and I could be really sad. And again, I think both are great examples to just walk with a counselor or a specialist about that.
That's great.
Cult leader over your life as a description of anxiety is money. If you struggle with anxiety, you just got the best definition ever. Like, I needed to hear that. Thank you. I'm stealing it, by the way. That'll be in a sermon in 2 weeks.
Okay, the third question is just an open question for the panel, right? So this question is, how do you know if you have the right counselor or if they are completely off base? If I don't feel like they are the best fit, how should I communicate that to him or her?
Hi. Okay. I'll say a first part, and then I think Emma will say something. But my opinion on this is it's okay to not jive with your counselor. They shouldn't take it personally. And part of the therapy that you're going to learn is to talk up for yourself and have that self-confidence and telling them that I just don't think that this is working. Is there someone else you can recommend? There's nothing wrong with that, and owning that is part of you growing into what you need to get the help you need.
I think, I don't know how to really top that. And Kelly has a great answer too, I'm sure. But I think, part of counseling is for you to have forward momentum, that you're coming in, you're putting in the work on both, person and the counselor, and you're really making strides towards treatment goals and for you to find freedom from whatever it looks like that you came in with. So if you find, hey, I've been at a counselor for a while and I'm not growing, I'm not seeing a change, it might be time for a conversation. And the counselor should welcome that. And if they don't, I think you might have your answer.
That's good.
And just to add to that, when you start therapy, so I offer a 15-minute free consultation at the beginning. So if somebody reaches out to me, I have a dialogue with them about what they're looking for, what my strengths are, what my strengths are not, because I'm not great at everything. And hopefully the therapist that you are reaching out to understands their strengths and the things that they could pass on to someone else. Psychology today, if you're looking for a therapist, a lot of times they will list the things that they specialize in, things that they do not. So the other thing, when I do meet with somebody in our first assessment session, is I will ask them, have you ever been to therapy before? If you have, what are some things that you really liked about that therapist? What are some things that you felt like wasn't the best fit? And so then I speak to, this is kind of who I am. So I tend to be very straightforward, to the point, but I'm not everybody's cup of tea. And so, that may not be the way that you want me to speak to you. So if I ever do or say something in session that you don't really like, I ask you to come to me first before you just ghost me, right? Because I want to grow as a therapist myself. And I also want you to practice those assertiveness skills, speaking up for yourself. And that's the safest place to have that conversation. So again, knowing that you are the expert of yourself and you're coming to me and I'm just going to kind of help guide you, knowing that you know yourself. So those are some kind of ways. Personal experience, as a therapist, it's really hard to find other therapists to be your therapist. And so I have gone to therapists that are like, I share, and then they stare at me, mute. And they're like, I'm really embarrassed, but I don't know what to say to you right now. And I'm like, okay, well, then I feel like confident that if I don't know how to fix it and you don't know how to fix it, then we're both screwed, right? No. So then I find somebody else. And then the next person completely disregarded my beliefs in my faith. And so that didn't really work for me either. And now I have an amazing therapist who jives with me. I can tell her, hey, I need it real and raw. And she gives me what I need, or, hey, I just need you to just be present with me.
Okay, this next question is for Denine. We received multiple questions on how to find the best resources in the area. Can you provide some feedback on how to find help for a variety of mental health needs?
Well, being someone that's new to this area within the last 4 years, that is a great question, because before I started at Trillium Place, I was a clinical director for a foster care agency, and I didn't know any of the places. So having friends that know things in the area was a big help. But I'm speaking for Trillium Place. There is, and I do have flyers that Alyssa put somewhere that you can take, but there's a number that you can call that will guide you to what your needs are within Trillium Place, all the services that we have around the Peoria area in Tazewell County and Woodford County. But in this day and age, Google's not a bad thing either, because you can read about a different agency to see if they tell you about the counselors and whatever your interest is. So whether it's mental health or substance abuse or whatever treatment that you need, Google is, pretty good at giving you some idea. But anyone else have anything that?
I was so confident, and now I'm like, where did the thought go? I think the whole panel will be available afterwards if people wanted to have more questions about what their needs are, and we can try and figure out great resources for that. I would say figure out what you would like to accomplish with your mental health, and let that be like the driving force in your search, and really find those specialists that hone in on that. The Holt Center, so they're right down the street on Knoxville. They do a great work with a lot of group therapy for families and individuals, and just anybody who lost a loved one with suicide. There's an eating disorder clinic in OSF. I'm trying to think of other things like that.
I would say this, being new to the area as well in the last 4 years and needing to find some help in this space for our family, I think this is more about taking ownership and, once again, sounding your voice. No one will care about your health or the health of your child or your needs more than you. No one. And so when you start to pursue that, walk unashamed in pursuing it very, very aggressively. And I don't mean walk into a clinic and get buck wild, but I'm saying, I will find help. Tell me who to call next. Tell me who to email next. There are people out there. You may have to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hoops. It is worth it. And you are the most powerful person to advocate for you or your child. And don't stop till you find the resource you need. They are out there. It took us almost a year for someone to believe our story, to point us to the help we need. But I'm telling you, it was worth every single day of the battle, okay? So Google, call, ask, everywhere. No one will care as much as you do.
Okay, the next question is for Kelly. So what are the signs that a person should seek a prescription for medication for their mental health issue? For someone who doesn't like to take medication, are there natural remedies to help with mental health?
Great question. So the first thing, kind of Psych 101 for us as therapists, is that we want to rule out any medical causes. So I always encourage people that come in to see me, when's the last time that you've had a physical with your primary care? Have you done routine blood work recently? Because that's going to tell a lot of the story, or it's going to help us rule out some things. So that's a very, very important first thing. Once you have either ruled out or your primary sends you back to a therapist to say, we figure it out, which can happen and can be really fun, you just start to understand, am I experiencing any persistent changes in mood that make it difficult to work, have relationships, have daily functioning, right? So if I'm having a hard time showering, getting out of bed, all those things. You might be having some physical symptoms, so sleep disturbances, which meaning you're actually sleeping too much or too little. Appetite changes, the same thing, eating too much or too little. Chronic fatigue or low energy without a clear physical cause is another thing to look out for. Any reckless or risky behavior, including substance abuse, that's in response to mental health. Any thoughts of self-harm or suicide, you want to seek help immediately. So that's something we don't want to wait for. It's also important to note with medication that there are some medications that will increase thoughts of suicide and self-harm. And so that's something to be in conversation with your doctor or whoever prescribed that to you. That's very important to note. Failure to improve with therapy or other non-medication approaches. So again, therapy is not the end-all be-all. We're kind of a holistic, hey, let's work together. It's not necessarily a one or the other. and any personal family history of mental health. So if you have a parent or a sibling that you know has been diagnosed with something and you know a particular medication works well for them, that could be something that works for you as well. If you, it's also a signal that biologically maybe you come from a family where there are chemical imbalances in the brain. So again, the more that you know about your history, that can help you as well. If you have rapid changes in mood or in your behavior, such as like a manic, hey, I can conquer the world type of attitude, and that continues for several days, maybe you don't sleep because you feel like you don't need to sleep, all of those things, or any type of psychosis. So where you maybe are hearing or seeing things that may not be there, that's also when you would want to reach out about medication. So the most important thing is that medication is the most effective when it is combined with therapy and lifestyle changes. So the second question, what are some alternatives, is, again, those lifestyle changes could include regular exercise, healthy eating, getting enough sleep. So again, not too much or too little, not too much or too little. Going outside, going for a walk, getting that vitamin D from the sun, that can help us. If we try to use our mindfulness, our meditation, our breathing exercises, journaling, if music is something that speaks to your soul, all of those things can help you outside of medication potentially. Speaking of migraines, I actually went to a naturopath, and they actually healed 21 years of migraines for me with just supplements and vitamins, and that was a game changer. So that's another option. Acupuncture can help, art or music therapy. There's different type of gratitude exercises, positive affirmations. I do that with my 10-year-old daughter every morning before school. We do affirmation videos. And the main thing I want you to remember is that consistency is the key. No matter what you do, we can't try it once. You can't come to me as a client and say, well, I took a deep breath this week and it didn't work. And I'm like, okay, let's go back and try again. More, right? We need to be consistent. So, yeah.
Love it. Okay. Going back to Pastor Chad. I was just pausing to make sure he understood I said his name. Okay, Pastor Chad, the next question we have up for you is, do those who die by suicide still go to heaven?
Oh, that's fun. So this is going to be obvious, but I've never been to heaven, right? I'm here. So I can't confidently declare who is there and who is not there. I am not the judge of all the earth, right? However, biblically, here is what we are certain of, okay? This is what I'm certain of from the pages of Scripture, time with God. Number one, there is only one unforgivable sin that is biblically named, and it's called the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. There's not two. There's not three. There's not a lifestyle. There's not a mode of death named as unforgivable. There's one, right? A religious leader may tell you this is unforgivable, and you can go back and listen to the words of Jesus, and there's one. Number two, salvation, heaven, and eternity are not based on the good or bad works of humans. Salvation, heaven, and eternity are based on acceptance of the finished work of Jesus Christ on the cross and his resurrection, right? And so my eternal destination is not based upon how I die or choose to. It is based upon the cross of Jesus Christ and the belief that he rose from the dead, and therefore I will as well. We could go through 100 scriptures on this, right? Ephesians 2:8-9 is the full mention of it. For by grace you've been saved through faith. This is not your own doing. which also connects it to it is not your undoing. Right? It is the gift of God, not a result of works. He doesn't say certain works. He says works. So that, and here's the key point, no one may boast. So that if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, saved by grace through faith, and you go to heaven and then go into eternity, new heaven, new earth, new Jerusalem, all that presence in eternity is not based on a single thing that you did other than acceptance of the salvation, grace, heaven, and eternity of Jesus Christ. So, never been to heaven, but I'm banking on those truths to hold true.
Okay, next question's for Emma. Another two-part question. Yes. Okay, part one. What are early signs of mental health issues that may arise in children 0 to 12? Do those signs present differently in young girls versus boys? And what are the most common mental health issues faced by children? I still feel like those were 3 parts, but we'll have you try to...
That was only part one?
That was part one.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to do this out of order. I would say, I think one of the most common mental health issues faced by children is worry, is anxiety. And that can transpire into other things, but that's kind of the base that we're seeing for a lot of kiddos. I talked a little bit about how that could show up physically with anxiety in a previous question. So, but I think some of the early signs in girls and boys, girls you might see a little bit more rigidity and perfectionism, like this is the way I want to do this certain thing, and there's not a lot of flexibility to it. So as a parent, you help them become flexible to it. And I think for boys, you might see a little bit more irritability and impulsivity. But that doesn't mean for either of those it could be ADHD. It could, but it doesn't mean that it is the diagnosis. So I would just, like Pastor Chad said, take that gauntlet. Really be an advocate for your kids' mental health. Really ask the right questions and make sure it's the right diagnosis and the right medication for your child. I think I answered that. All of part one.
Yeah.
School avoidance, I see a lot of this with working with kiddos. So if they're struggling to be in school and stay in school, again, promoting that flexibility. Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to part 2 then. How do I know if my teenagers are depressed or simply, quote, teenagers? They sleep until noon on weekends. They like to stay in their rooms, gaming, playing guitar, etc. Good luck.
Man, I don't think you can. But there are some cool tools that maybe I can teach you shortly. If you haven't read the new book, Anxious Generation, I would encourage you to. I would applaud all of you for being here tonight because it's a great first step into asking these hard questions. If you want to discover more, though, about adolescence, who your kiddos are, and what they're up against, the book is called Anxious Generation. And it takes a great deep dive into how technology has impacted this generation, how school has a lack of independence and free play. So I would say if they're depressed or simply teenagers, ask them and say, hey, is something going on? I notice you're in your room a lot. Tell me about that. Why do you like your room? What about it makes you feel really safe? What do you love about your guitar? How do you feel when you play your guitar? And so if they are, again, with a prolonged, they're in this phase for a while, ask those questions. Be curious. Our kids want us to show up, be involved in our lives, and just know that we're there for them.
Add to that real quick.
Yeah.
It made me think of some of the tools that I've used is, I'm about to tell some of your secrets, teenagers, is when you want to speak to your teen, don't face them. Have them sit to the side of you. And preferably do it with food because they're more likely to talk. Another thing that has been really helpful is using that technology for your benefit. If your teen has a phone, is we use kind of a rating system in our house of, hey, if you're starting to, if they acknowledge I do have some challenges, and 10 is like the danger zone, or 7 to 10 is the danger zone, I don't have to ask them every day, are you feeling depressed? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling happy? What are you feeling, right? They're not going to talk to you. That's going to be annoying. So I just say, hey, if we start to hit the danger zone, can you just text me a 7? Can you text me an 8? If we're at a 10, and we've already pre-planned what does it mean if they hit that 7, that 8, that 9, or that 10.
That's really good. Okay, we have another panel question. Can you describe a strong or, quote, ideal mental health? And what does a mentally healthy person feel like and act like?
I don't know. I've never been one. TBD.
I feel like this is a Bueller moment, so I'm going to take it. So I would say that is really up to you as the person. I cannot tell you that there's one golden example of if you meet these 10 factors, then you're mentally stable, right? That's why we create treatment plans. Because we say, what is your goal? What is your desire for your life? If you know that, or I might ask a question, tell me about a time that you felt like you were functioning at your highest. What is your goal for meeting that again? Or have you ever seen someone that you think is really strong? And what are some of the characteristics that you see in them? If I'm an introvert, my goal will not be to become an extrovert. That's not going to be my ideal of a strong mentally healthy person, because I am an introvert. So that's not going to be my thing. So it's really up to the individual person, and I hope that answers that.
May I add to that?
Yes, you may.
If I know when I'm not healthy mentally, so flip it. Like if I know the signs of when I'm not healthy, right? Irritation, struggle sleeping, this, then the opposite means I'm on a closer path, right? And so that's some ways for me. I don't know what ideal means, I think you do have to set that. But if you know when you're unhealthy, I think you can use that as a tool to gauge what is the opposite of it.
Does anyone else have anything to add, or does that feel complete? Okay, great. So the next question is for Denine. Could you please expand on caring for and dealing with aging parents that will be passing relatively soon? Guilt, stress, and generally being overwhelmed when parent-child roles change and go to more of a patient-caregiver role. How do I find balance, stay patient, and deal with their emotions and my own?
I was intrigued getting this question because I don't think anyone that picked these questions knew that I had personal experience with this. So I'm going to speak from my history. I had a mom that I cared for and who passed. But in that process of parent-child role, and when that role ends, you have to let yourself have that grieving period of knowing, I no longer have a parent. I am now the parent. And for someone like me, my mom was a very strong person, and thus probably why I am, but it was very hard because it's like, how do you grieve that when I'm having to take care of a parent that is sick or dying, and I don't want to be their parent, but it is a process. So you have to own feeling that, and own feeling that helps you through some of that. It's not going to solve everything, but it's a process, and being there for your parent in their time of need is going to take you decades beyond when they're still on this earth. And that is the piece that you can help get through those hard days. And there are lots of hard days. But the other thing I would say is find your own outlet in self-care, because if you don't do the self-care while you're in that parent role, you're going to burn out. And if you burn out, you're not going to be any good to yourself or your parent. So finding an outlet, finding your group of people that you can talk to, or just somebody to talk to, if it's not a counselor or a therapist, having your own self-care is important in getting through that phase of life.
Beautiful. Okay, Kelly, this is another multi-part question, okay? Part one, I have PTSD from past military service that is getting older instead of fading, getting bigger instead of fading. The VA doctor offers ways to calm myself when I get triggers, but is there a way to overcome this?
You guys came hard with the questions, didn't you? Can we go to part two? Because I'd actually like to maybe answer that first.
Yeah, sure. So part two are suppressed memories, things that you're told happened, but you have absolutely no recollection of, a trauma response. What causes these, and why would the brain hide these?
Okay, so these are very specific questions, obviously. And I would say, first of all, the suppressed memories question that you're told happened, but you have absolutely no recollection of. As a therapist, I would want to unpack that a little bit because I'm not really sure what that means. Also, as a therapist, I'm going to be really careful to determine whether or not you want to unpack those memories, because sometimes it can be more harmful. And if you have no recollection and you're not having any symptoms related, like physical somatic symptoms related to those potential memories, then we may choose not to address them. Or we may say, hey, as we go along further in therapy, if you feel that those things are popping up, then we can maybe take it from there. But I'm not going to create a trauma when you don't experience that trauma. I'm not going to add to that for you. So why does the brain do this? Number one, God created our brain to protect itself from extremely scary or painful experiences. So we have a creator who created our brain to do amazing things for us. And the brain, when we experience these events, our brain can it's almost like a library where it will catalog books incorrectly. We can actually file our memories, and it will store in places that it's not really supposed to be. And it also makes it more difficult to access it, but it's a way to protect us. It's a way to keep us from feeling overwhelmed by the pain or the fear that's associated with that event. It's almost like a grief response. I tell my clients, like, when you've been through the first year of grief, the second tends to be a lot harder because it's almost like that fog starts lifting. It's a protection mechanism, right? So not only is it a protection mechanism, it's a survival mechanism. A lot of times if we've had, these PTSD, extremely scary, experiences, we would be in the corner in a ball somewhere if we felt the weight of that. So we also, if we felt the weight of those experiences, it would cause us to not be able to focus on our immediate safety or our ability to function in daily life. So that's one of the things that can happen. There's a term called dissociation, if you're familiar with that, and that may occur during an event to actually help us mentally detach, and that can make it hard to remember any or parts of that event. And you can actually see and experience that dissociation in life if something, like maybe you have a flashback or you smell something that reminds you of that event. It might pop you right back into that dissociative state, and so you may not even understand really what's happening. Suppressed memories. Children are actually especially susceptible because their coping mechanisms and their cognitive processing is not yet developed. And so it may cause them to have their memories more deeply buried, and they might start to have those things emerging in adulthood. Again, it might be sights, it might be smells, it might be sounds, it might be places that you start to have. I don't know why this feels familiar, but it does. So the part one question of like, what do we do for our PTSD or these types of memories? I'm actually trained in a modality called brain spotting. And when our memories kind of get stuck, there's concepts. So EMDR is another like brain body therapy modality that you might be more familiar of. But brain spotting is really about when we're doing talk therapy, we stay up here in our prefrontal cortex, and those memories that kind of hang with us, they hang out in our mid to our lower brain. And with brain spotting, using what we call bilateral music, so it's just music that bounces from one ear to the next, that helps us tap into our right and our left brain. Our right brain is responsible for our emotions, and our left brain is responsible for like our thinking. And so a lot of times when we have those scary experiences, the experiences get stuck in the emotion side of our brain, and so we have to help them process through, okay? So brain spotting, the concept is that where you look is how you feel. And it actually just, I don't know, it's this magic. It's not really magic, though. We're in a church. It's not magic.
That's an email.
Chad Manbeck at... No. It's really, we use a pointer, and it helps our eyesight go to whatever place in the brain that memory is stored, and it helps clear it. So I've had experiences where somebody came to me, and within 10 minutes, they had said, I don't know, I feel like something happened, it just got, but I don't know what it is. In 10 minutes, we were able to bring up that memory, and she processed through in a session, and we were done. So again, God has created these brilliant people. David Gran was the one that created brain spotting. God has created brilliant minds to create techniques using a pencil that will help your eyesight find where it needs to find to help unlock those memories.
So good.
Yeah. Okay, going back to Pastor Chad for a minute. Do you believe Satan has power like Christ to put his demons in our heads, like Christ can with his Holy Spirit?
So we'll talk about some things here that'll make some uncomfortable, and some, finally, the church is willing to admit. And the first thing is this. So there's some things to note, I think, in this. And we could talk about this more offline if you wanted to. Spiritual warfare is real. Now, you have options. You can pretend it's not real. It doesn't make it any less real, right? And I know some of us, like, we weren't raised in that denomination or that kind of teaching, or that is such dangerous territory because of other denominations and how they handled it. So we just put spiritual warfare over here, leave it alone, and ignore it. And ignoring it is the worst thing you can do, right? It's the worst thing you can do, right? Ephesians 6:12, right? For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Everything we're talking about tonight is the devil's playground too. And we have to be careful what is spiritual, what is medical, what is, right? Holistic approach, okay? So that's number one. Spiritual warfare is real. Number two, demons and Satan himself are real, vicious, and seeking to destroy the lives of not just believers, but humans, right? We know that the enemy is walking up and down in the earth seeking someone to devour. Someone, anyone, right? Both Christian and non-Christian, right? Demons and Satan himself are haters of humanity because we are the image of God, right? So, to your question, demon possession, I believe wholeheartedly, is possible for non-believers. Demon oppression, demon possession, non-believers. Demon oppression is possible for children of God. And here's the difference. Non-believers are not sealed by the Spirit of God. They do not have the Holy Spirit of God residing in them, and therefore can be vessels of the demonic, and I've seen it, right, and dealt with it. Children of God, once you become a believer in God, are vessels of God's Spirit, and therefore cannot be vessels of demons, but can and are victims of oppression, right? So, do you believe Satan has power like Christ to put his demons in our heads like Christ can with his Holy Spirit? Yes. I am confident and have witnessed demon possession in those who do not have the Holy Spirit residing in them. I am confident and have witnessed as well as experienced often demonic oppression as a child of God.
Yep. All right.
Clapped a little slower on that one. Did you see that? Yeah.
Okay, Emma is up next. So, can you prevent mental health problems? Are there things parents can do to ensure their children will have a better outcome on this topic in the future?
Yes and no. I think there are ways that you can reduce the likelihood of kiddos being exposed to traumatic situations or certain social situations or things on the screens. But I think more than anything as parents, what you can do is you can work to instill resilience and flexibility and space for your home and for your kiddos. For your teens and kids, that you can help them to slow down as a family so that they're able to regulate their emotions and process through what's happening. So many teens come into my office and they are playing travel basketball, travel soccer. We have homework that we're doing at 11 o'clock at night. I got to race home for a school play, and then on the weekends we're going to this, and this. There is no time for a child to rest, to be independent, to create some of those vital skills that they need to be resilient for the rest of their lives. So when you think about preventative measures, like help your kid, slow down your schedule, allow independence, allow for them to make their own choices. You are taking the first step by coming here, by asking really good questions. Ask them questions too. Because they want to be taken seriously. They want to be treated like an adult. And they know their own mental health. So ask them questions.
That's so good. Yeah. Okay, we have our last panel question. What would be some keys to balancing and or integrating traditional medicine with therapy, with reliance and praying for healing from God?
I feel like I kind of answered this with the medication one. So again, going back to, as medication is not the end-all be-all. Therapy is not the end-all be-all. I believe that God can, and yet we kind of already answered that as well. So it's important to understand that each has its place. Integrating is understanding that I'm not going to stop praying, but I'm going to ask God to send me to the person that maybe I'm going to connect the most with. And that's going to somebody that will be able to provide wisdom into the right medication that might work best with my body, or the type of talk therapy, or the type of brain body modality I need, somebody that just is really going to meet my needs. And I'm going to pass that to you. Okay.
So I'll come from firsthand experience on this, because I think there's a thing beneath the thing in this question. And I don't know who asked it. These were anonymous. And I may be wrong. I've taken medication for a long time. You know that from the first message, right? I've taken different doses of that medication based on need and based on my own personal growth. I have, at different seasons, not taken that medication for long periods of time. And I have, during those seasons, hid that from my wife because of an internal struggle I have with the shame of taking medication. And I would like to not take it. So, the thing beneath the thing here is, what is the tension you're experiencing that both things can't coexist? That I have to be equally balanced with my complete dependency on God and my need for medical treatment, or in this case, medication, right? I have nothing to be ashamed of because I have something in my brain that causes a deficiency, that causes me to need some help. And I have to wrestle that down to the ground with God, that both can coexist in my life. That I can be a man after God's own heart and take 20 milligrams of citalopram once a day. And that has been a journey for me. It still is. I still see the pill bottle on my counter and wish it didn't exist. Still. Right? And so I understand that, but I think what someone here is looking for is just hearing, is it okay to feel that tension of, should I trust God more or should I take my medication? And I can tell you, based on error, is you should feel okay about both. Right? You should feel okay about both. I am a better follower of Jesus when I walk unashamed and take what helps me perform at my best. Right? I'm a better follower of Jesus. And it's only shame that causes me to think, you should be stronger, Pastor. You should be free of that medicine. And so, don't do that. If you need accountability for that, like I have now, my wife checks my bottle. Serious. Because we both lived through the trauma of me crashing mentally. And you have to ask yourself, what's more important, right? Is my family most important? And therefore, I'm going to be the best me I can be. And maybe that means I need a little help medically. It's the same thing with therapy and counseling. If you feel shame walking into a therapist, or you won't go to a counselor because there might be somebody at your church in that office, you need to think about you, your family, and God. And that's why we have the value, walk unashamed. This is me. And I am a work in process that will not be finished until he takes me home. I don't know if that's helpful.
And the best thing I can do for my friend Chad here is to not put shame on him. Right? I can pray for him, I can pray with him, but I can also say, I've got you. I've got your back, whatever you need. And whatever you've chosen to do for your body, I'm going to just sit with you, and I'm going to be present with you.
Thanks for that addition. That was perfect. Okay, we only have 2 more questions to go. Okay, so the next one is for Denine. And this is, I have a friend who was going through a very tough time with some really scary signs. I called to multiple places for help, but was passed around and was told they could not help unless they were suicidal or homicidal. No one seemed to care or wanted to help. What can someone do in that situation?
With this question, it was hard to know who was called that they were turned away, because that makes me mad. But the one thing to know, if you have someone that is a threat to themselves or others in Illinois, you can do a wellness check or call for a wellness check. You can call 911. But if they're not a threat to themselves or others, so the scary part was, I don't know really what that meant and the level of that. So if they're not a threat to themselves or others, you cannot make someone go to therapy. They have to want to do that. As their friend, being encouraging, being a support, and helping to tell them that you can be there with them. But they're, to have been told that there's nothing they can do, there's always something, 811 is it, I think? We have, for Trillium Place, we have numbers that anyone will answer when you call. There's 811, obviously 911 if they're, a threat to themselves or others. There's mobile crisis response in the Peoria County area and Tazwood and Woodford, and they're available 24 hours as well. So there are people to call, and always keep trying to call. Whoever said that to this question, the person from this question, and said, they couldn't help, that's sad, because it should never be that way. There's always someone you can call for help. We're out here, and, just by, I would say most therapists or people in this field are mostly introverts. So we might go undetected in public, but when it comes to the crisis situations, that's when we step up. And it's really disheartening to see this question, because I've spent my career helping people with these problems. So I would never want someone to not have someone on the other end of that phone that can help. So I can give anyone my card, and you can call me, and I will make sure I get you where you need to go in this area. But, there's always somebody. So never stop trying to make those phone calls for someone that you care about that needs help.
Yeah.
You're sitting in a church that will help. Just call. Walk in. We'll get you to Denine. We'll get you to friends, right? We will help. It's literally the first part of our mission statement, helping people. Okay? So no one seemed to care or wanted to help. Promise you, you will not experience that here. Oh, I go to another church. I don't care. Come here if you can't find help. We'll walk it with you.
Okay, this is our last question that was submitted, and this is another, it says 2-part, but I think it's actually like 20. So I hope you're ready, Kelly. Okay, the first part is, can you please address setting boundaries for maintaining personal well-being along with biblical principle to bear one another's burdens?
I got it, guys. I got it. All right. So first of all, boundaries are really important. Okay, number 1. So whoever told you that you lay down your life and do everything for all people, Jesus did lay down his life, and yet he also took time to rest. He sent those silly disciples away when they got on his nerves. I don't know he actually got on their nerves, but he said, I'm going to take a boat. This is how far I can get away because I got to rest from y'all, right? So boundaries are very, very important because it helps protect both people in the relationship. It helps us both experience freedom because we understand the rules or the guardrails that are going on in that dynamic. When we allow someone into our space, we're saying we're going to give you enough trust that you're going to accept the responsibility that you're going to respect our boundaries. Okay, so the person who's setting the boundaries is saying to you, the person who's getting ready to be in our space, I'm just in good faith saying you're going to respect me. Okay, when that doesn't happen, Lisa Turkhurst is an amazing author and speaker, and she has an amazing book called Good Boundaries and Goodbyes. And she talks about, I'm paraphrasing, but when we allow others to cross our boundaries unchecked, we are validating their bad behavior. We're saying that it's acceptable to press our boundaries, okay? So again, it's on us to set the boundary, hold the boundary, speak to the boundary if it's broken, okay? So I think that answers that first question. We want to be present for people, and at the same time, if we can't kind of just have that basic knowledge or acceptance that that's how we're going to handle things with each other, then it's okay to say, I'm going to move the boundary closer to myself so that I feel safe and protected for you to be maybe a little further away from me.
Okay, so part 2, this is the more lengthy part. So what is the best way of handling a situation where another individual with mental illness makes you feel responsible for their mental well-being to the point where you start to feel drained, guilty, fearful, anxious, and eventually also depressed because of it? For example, they threaten to harm themselves because no one is doing enough for them.
So if I can just be a little vulnerable, that's every therapist's feeling at one time or another. I don't want to speak for you two, but every day that somebody comes to me, they're expecting me to fix it. And the truth is it's not my job to fix. It's my job to sit with you and walk with you and present you skills that if you don't use the skills, then it's not going to get better. If you come to me and say, I've already given you 20 skills, and you come and say nothing's working that you're doing, I'm going to say, which skills did you try? And you say nothing, I'm going to say, I don't want to give you more information because we don't know if what we've already put on the table is going to work or not, right? So that's step 1. Knowing your strengths. So if you're somebody who doesn't do this for a living, right? Number 1, for everybody, we need to know our strengths. We need to know the things that we're good at, okay? So when we're trying to be something that we are not, we're running the risk of being more of a harm to the person we actually want to help, okay? So I might say to somebody, I really want to help you fix your car. I'm not the one, right? Because you're going to actually not be able to pull your car out of the parking lot if you let me under that hood, right? But I would be open to helping you find resources or someone who might be able to answer that for you or get that done for you, okay? Then knowing your capacity. So we can't, again, going back to boundaries, we can't be frustrated with others when we fail to explain to them our ability to hold space for their needs. So again, it's not on them to set the boundary for us. We have to tell them, my capacity is, I'm at 99%. So I used to work for Child Protective Services, and I had a parent that would call me every single day, multiple times a day. And of course, she's concerned about her family and her child, and when is she getting this child back? And so I had to say, you are important to me. I also have 50 other families that I'm working with, and so they're they're going through very similar things that you are. And so let's do this. On Thursdays at 10, for 30 minutes, you're going to have my time. So I want you to write down every question, everything you want to say to me, so that when it comes to Thursday at 10, you know exactly what you want to ask, so that we can have very productive time and you know that you're important to me. So with people that, are coming to you saying, I need all of your time, set a time limit and say, hey, I have an hour for you at coffee on Thursday once a week. It's yours. The other one is knowing how to recognize when you're discouraged or you're at your limit, okay? This often comes from unrealistic expectations from them as well as us. So we have to know our warning signs when we're tapping out. And if it's, I just want to go in a boat and leave all of you. If it's, I want to go to sleep for 4 days. If it's, I'm hungry, but I don't even have the energy to think about making a meal, and so I'm just going to go to bed. Or, whatever it is, it's knowing what your warning signs are. It's knowing who your support system is, who you can speak to into your life when they notice you're doing too much. They can say, hey, I'm vetoing that activity on your schedule because you've reached your limit. And the final thing is just knowing that we can't be all things to all people. Say, going back to even Jesus took time to rest. I think maybe it was more for the disciples' benefit, but you could speak to that. So I flew on a plane here from Vegas, and they always say, secure your own oxygen mask before you help the person next to you. That's because we can't give to others what we don't have.
Can I add to that, Kelly? Great job. Brene Brown has a great quote, and it says, the most empathetic people have the strictest boundaries. So they're able to give empathy because they know these are my boundaries, this is the space I'm able to give you, and I'm able to give that fully because I'm filled up, because I have really strict boundaries to help you with my empathy that I can give freely. So I would just encourage you with that. That first part of the question felt like I had so much shame in it. And there's no shame, because boundaries are really great, and we are meant to be empathetic people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so while that is all of the questions that were submitted from the church, we wanted to have a moment to where our panel could just answer a simple question. It's simple, but it's not so simple. If there was one thing that you would want people in attendance here tonight to walk away with, the golden nugget, so to speak, what would that one thing be?
I will say that I think everyone should at some point in their life see a therapist. Whether you think you need it or not, it helps you see what it's like hearing from someone else that is unbiased, that you have no affiliation to outside of that office, and it gives you a collective back to you that you may or may not want to hear. And it takes you out of a comfort zone that you might think that I don't need to see a therapist. I think it is healthy for everyone to see a therapist at some point. Finding the right one is a different story. You can keep looking. There is a lot of us out there, and a lot of people do different things better than others. So that's my little nugget.
If you haven't been to church here before, after this sermon series, we're going back to the book of John, which is awesome. But in the beginning of John, it talks about how Jesus came so that you can have life and have it to the full. And my takeaway here is that if you're wrestling with anything that we've talked about tonight, you cannot live that full life that Jesus talks about. And maybe you have a friend, a kiddo, maybe it's you personally. If you are a Christ follower, lean into that. Help your friend, help your child, help live life to the full, the way God intended, that whole life.
So mine would be that let us be a no judgment zone. On the internet, there's this, we listen and we don't judge, floating around. So it's okay to not be okay, right? We live in a society where we have the pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? I work with a lot of first responders, and that's their, I'm too tough to need help, but it's okay to not be okay. And one of my favorite sayings with my clients, and I'm going to pronounce this very carefully, is stop shoulding on yourself and others. Okay? Stop shoulding on yourself and others. So when I tell myself I should be able to handle this, I should be over that by now, and you tell your friend you should just stop it, right? You should just pray about it. That's not a judgment-free zone, and it doesn't express to that person it's not okay to not be okay, right? If I ever hear the term "at least" start to come out of my mouth, I'm going to stop, because whatever comes after that is not going to be helpful. I'm also going to ask myself, is the question or the statement that's about to come out of my mouth going to help this person or hurt this person? Because I want to be somebody that is a healer and not a harmer. So it's okay to not be okay, and stop shooting on yourself.
More emails. Thanks, Vegas. I have two thoughts, and I'm trying to give a lot of these, over the weeks of this series. We'll be tackling suicide this Sunday, and so there'll be some thoughts there. But two that came to mind, really, as we sat here, was never allow other people to weaponize God in your mental health struggle. We've got to stop allowing that to be normal and okay. If you've been hurt by a religious institution, by a pastor, by someone spiritual, I'm sorry. Find some place you're not hurt. Find some place that's safe. And stop allowing people to weaponize God against your mental health struggle. There's nothing about the character of God that would ever do that. Ever do that. He's a God of compassion and mercy and grace and love and forgiveness. He's slow to anger. Even his anger is slow to happen. And so never let that. And then the other thing I would say, and this is from Tyler Merritt, he says, proximity breeds empathy and distance breeds suspicion. Be careful judging something from afar that you know nothing about. Right? If someone struggles with any mental health struggle, get close enough to them to understand what they go through, and you will. It will automatic. You draw close to anyone, you will discover empathy. You will understand. You will listen, and you will be more compassionate. It is so easy to sit here and look way over there and say, man, if they just did this, they wouldn't keep struggling like that. From distance, suspicion is easy. When you draw closer, empathy is so key. And as those of us who struggle with mental health issues, finding empathy is like a warm blanket. We will pull you in because it is unfortunately rare.
Okay. Those are all of the comments and the questions we have. I hope that everyone here took at least one thing away. I took many, even just sitting up here. So if we could take a moment and just thank the panel for their wisdom.